Star Wars Episode IV: A New Hope. Luke Skywalker is a 19-year-old farm boy dreaming of adventure until he crosses paths with two droids that drag him right into the middle of a civil war between the Galactic Empire, an oppressive dictatorship, and the Rebel Alliance, fighters trying to restore freedom. Under the guidance of veteran Obi-Wan Kenobi, Luke discovers he's sensitive to the Force, an energy field that grants powers to the Jedi, peacekeepers like Obi-Wan, and their enemies, the Sith, who use the dark side for evil. To rescue Princess Leia, Luke teams up with Han Solo, a cynical smuggler, and his Wookiee co-pilot, Chewbacca. Together, they manage to blow up the Death Star, a moon-sized space station capable of wiping out entire planets. The rebels win the battle, but Obi-Wan Kenobi dies and the imposing villain Darth Vader manages to escape, kicking off an eternal mythology. Star Wars Holiday Special. Following the success of A New Hope, Star Wars tried to make the jump to television. The story follows Han Solo as he tries to get Chewbacca back to his home planet to celebrate Life Day. This holiday special featured the entire original cast and leaned a lot more into comedy. But its low production value, awkward pacing, and ridiculous situations led to a massive backlash that lasted for years. Even so, it does include the animated short The Story of the Faithful Wookiee, which marks the very first appearance of Boba Fett, a bounty hunter who ends up causing plenty of trouble for Han Solo in The Empire Strikes Back. Star Wars Episode V: The Empire Strikes Back. Following the Rebel victory, the Empire launches a fierce counter-offensive, forcing the heroes to scatter across the galaxy. While Han and Leia are hunted by the relentless Vader, eventually getting betrayed and captured in a city in the clouds, Luke travels to the remote Dagobah system. There, he trains with Yoda, a legendary exiled Jedi Master, who teaches him to deepen his connection to the Force. Ignoring his master's advice, a still undertrained Luke tries to rescue his friends and faces Vader in a lightsaber duel. The villain not only defeats him physically, but also destroys his entire world by revealing the most painful truth in movie history. He is his father.
I am your father.
Star Wars Episode VI: Return of the Jedi. After rescuing Han Solo, the heroes lead a desperate assault against a second Death Star, which is protected by Emperor Palpatine, the sinister leader of the Sith and Vader's master. While the Rebel fleet fights in space, Luke confronts his father once again. During this confrontation, he discovers that Leia is his sister. In a final act of redemption, Darth Vader betrays his master to save Luke, sacrificing his own life to destroy the Emperor. With the fall of the Empire and the Sith, the galaxy celebrates its freedom as Luke cements his place as the last Jedi. Caravan of Courage, an Ewok adventure. Following the end of the original trilogy, the story continued in a made-for-TV movie format. Here, the main characters are the Ewoks, the species that helped the main heroes in Return of the Jedi. The action takes place chronologically between episodes 5 and 6 of the saga, and the plot centers around two lost children they have to help. Unlike the original trilogy, it's a much simpler story aimed strictly at a younger audience. Ewoks: The Battle for Endor. This time around, the Ewok tribe gets attacked by marauders working for a wicked king. One of the Ewoks manages to escape and leads a rescue mission to free his friends. The story is a bit more violent and throws in some pretty weird elements for the saga, like a literal witch. Star Wars Droids. This was Star Wars' first step into the world of animated series. The show centers around C-3PO and R2-D2, the iconic droids from the original trilogy. Ewoks. This was their second go at an animated show. This time, the adventures star the furry creatures in their own natural habitat, completely disconnected from humans or the Empire. Just like the Ewok TV movies, it blends science fiction and fantasy elements. Star Wars Episode I: The Phantom Menace. This kicks off a brand new trilogy. The franchise jumps back in time to show us how everything started. In a galaxy bogged down by bureaucracy, we meet Anakin Skywalker, a young slave boy with an unprecedented connection to the Force. Jedi Master Qui-Gon Jinn and his apprentice Obi-Wan Kenobi rescue him, believing he's the chosen one destined to destroy the Sith. While protecting Queen Padme Amidala from an invasion secretly orchestrated by the mysterious Darth Sidious, the Jedi clash with the lethal Darth Maul. After Qui-Gon is killed in combat, Obi-Wan takes on the heavy responsibility of training Anakin. This is where we get our first real taste of the franchise's political plotting, watching Senator Palpatine's rise to power and the early days of the Republic's downfall, the ancient galactic democracy protected by the Jedi that ruled for decades before the events of Episode IV. Star Wars Episode II: Attack of the Clones. 10 years have passed. Anakin is now a Padawan, or Jedi apprentice, and is assigned to protect Padme. He falls deeply in love with her, even though the Jedi Code strictly forbids emotional attachments. Meanwhile, Obi-Wan uncovers a mysterious clone army secretly created to serve the Republic, modeled after Jango Fett, a bounty hunter who travels with his son clone, Boba. The plot culminates with the outbreak of the Clone Wars, a galaxy-wide conflict where Anakin, blinded by the pain of losing his mother, commits his first real acts of cruelty, proving that his fear of loss is the perfect gateway to the dark side. Star Wars, Clone Wars. The action picks up right after Episode 2, showing Obi-Wan, Anakin, and the Republic under siege by the Sith and the Separatist Confederacy, a group of rebel systems that uses massive droid armies. Unlike Droids and Ewoks, this animated series is visually and narratively much more ambitious. It puts the heavy hitters of the new trilogy front and center, acting as a direct bridge to Episode 3. Star Wars Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. The 2000s prequel trilogy comes to a close. Anakin turns to the dark side, while Palpatine is revealed to be Darth Sidious and executes Order 66 to wipe out the Jedi and establish the Empire. Anakin and Obi-Wan face off in a duel, and the young Jedi ultimately transforms into Darth Vader. Padme loses her life, but not before giving birth to twins Luke and Leia. It's the bleakest chapter of the prequels, serving as the final bridge to the original trilogy. Star Wars: The Clone Wars. The success of the 2D series paved the way for the franchise's first CG animated show. Once again, the story takes place chronologically between Episodes 2 and 3. Obi-Wan and Anakin are still the main characters, but this time Anakin gets his own Padawan, Ahsoka Tano. The show also fleshes out the clone troopers, all while showing how Anakin leans closer and closer to the dark side. It ran for 7 seasons with 133 episodes, stretching out over a span of 12 years. Star Wars Rebels. Set 5 years before Episode 4, this show tells the story of a small group of rebels coming together. After pulling off a few sabotage missions, they launch an all-out war against the Empire. This is where we see the events that actually led to the formation of the Rebel Alliance. It brings back classic characters like Leia and Darth Vader, while giving a lot of spotlight to newer ones, starting with Ahsoka, her Padawan Sabine Wren, and the fearsome Grand Admiral Thrawn. Star Wars Episode 7, The Force Awakens. 30 years after the fall of the Empire, a new threat emerges. The First Order, led by Kylo Ren, the rogue son of Han Solo and Princess Leia. But new heroes also step up to join the resistance. The scavenger Rey, the defecting stormtrooper Finn, and the hotshot pilot, Poe Dameron. The story brings together classic and new characters, hitting its emotional peak when Kylo Ren murders his own father. Star Wars Episode 8, The Last Jedi. The Resistance desperately needs to rally strong allies to fight Kylo Ren. Rey tracks down Luke Skywalker and tries to convince the Jedi to train her. But Luke is a cynical man now, and we find out he had a complicated history with Kylo. Meanwhile, the Resistance is fighting to survive a relentless siege by the First Order. This movie puts a major spin on the mythology, deconstructing the Jedi themselves by questioning whether their traditions need to die for the galaxy to move forward, all while giving Luke a heroic send-off. That sparked a massive backlash, and the fallout from those choices would heavily impact the end of the trilogy. Rogue One, a Star Wars story. The Disney era of Star Wars expanded through spin-offs that stepped away from the main episodic saga to explore different genres. In Rogue One, the action runs parallel to the events of A New Hope. Jyn Erso, a young outlaw, and Captain Cassian Andor lead a squad of rebels to steal the Death Star plans and get them to Leia. Unlike the rest of the saga, this story plays out like a gritty war movie, focusing on everyday characters who don't have the Force but are still willing to sacrifice everything for the cause. Blips, a micro-series starring the franchise's most beloved droids and creatures, most notably R2-D2 and BB-8 from the sequel trilogy. The tone is purely comedic, aimed squarely at a younger audience. Forces of Destiny. Also in a micro-series format, this one consists of stories starring the female characters of the franchise, starting with Leia and Rey. Each segment is set at different points in the timeline, showing how the heroine's decisions are absolutely key. Solo, a Star Wars story. Another spin-off set years before Episode 4. We get to see the smuggler's origins, how his friendship with Chewbacca started, and his first steps into the galaxy far, far away. The plot plays out like a mix between a western and a heist movie. This gives us a chance to explore the franchise's criminal underworld, introducing other individuals who also become part of the mythology. Resistance. Taking place 6 months before The Force Awakens, the main character is Kazuda Siono, a Resistance pilot recruited to spy on the First Order. The story focuses on characters who aren't really connected to the Force, showing how they stand up to the threat led by Kylo Ren. Galaxy of Adventures. This series revisits the most iconic moments in the franchise, keeping the original audio, but reimagining the visuals with way more adrenaline and spectacle. It was an initiative specifically designed to hook a whole new generation. Star Wars Episode IX: The Rise of Skywalker. The finale of Disney's modern trilogy and the conclusion of the Skywalker saga that kicked off back in 1977. An old enemy from the past makes a comeback, Emperor Palpatine, who's plotting the rebirth of the Sith. Now, without Luke and Leia, Rey leads the fight to stop him, even after discovering she's the granddaughter of Darth Sidious himself. The climax decides the fate of the galaxy, as well as Kylo Ren's, who abandons the dark side to redeem himself as Ben Solo. With the help of the spirits of her masters, Rey achieves the impossible, uniting the Skywalker legacy in a final battle that puts an end to a 9-movie war between light and dark. Roll Out, an animated experiment aimed at a younger audience. It features the franchise's most iconic characters, but this time in a minimalist circular shape, just like BB-8. The main focus here is delivering a lighthearted adventure for kids. The Mandalorian. The action picks up 5 years after the events of Return of the Jedi. The main character is Din Djarin, better known as the Mandalorian, a lone bounty hunter. His life gets turned upside down when the Empire hires him to track down Grogu, a child connected to the Force, but he decides to protect the kid and return him to his own kind instead. The Western tone is much stronger here, and it introduces a bunch of new characters that fans absolutely fell in love with. Plus, we get the return of Boba Fett. The Book of Boba Fett, starring the iconic bounty hunter himself. Here we get to see his inner struggles and his ambitions to take over the territory once controlled by Jabba the Hutt. The show explores the galaxy's criminal underworld, while still framing the anti-hero very much like a space cowboy. Galaxy of Creatures, aimed at the same young audience as Roll Out. In this one, a droid travels across the galaxy to showcase the wildlife of different planets, including porgs and other creatures we've already seen in the franchise. The Bad Batch. This serves as a direct sequel to the Clone Wars. A squad of mutated clones is left adrift after the war. They become mercenaries and take in Omega, a young, unaltered clone. Along the way, they pull off rescue missions and face some heavy moral dilemmas. The show really explores the more human side of the clones and the galaxy's transition into the Empire. Star Wars Visions, an anthology series produced by Disney but animated by various anime studios. Each short reimagines the franchise with total freedom, completely ignoring the timeline or original character arcs, stepping entirely outside the canon. One example is the segment titled Tatooine Rhapsody, which features a rock concert on the famous planet. Obi-Wan Kenobi, a miniseries developed by Disney, marking the first time the Jedi Knight gets to be the main character. 10 years after the events of Episode 3, he has to come out of exile to protect a 10-year-old Leia. This forces him to once again face Anakin, who has now fully become Darth Vader. The story brings back the heavy emotional stakes of the trilogies, closing some of the open wounds between the Master and his former apprentice. Andor, a direct prequel to Rogue One. It shows Cassian Andor's past and how he goes from being a thief just trying to survive to leading a full-blown revolution against the Galactic Empire. It's an espionage thriller with a much more serious and mature tone, exploring both the high-stakes power games at the top and the gritty struggles of the outcasts on the ground. Galactic Pals, an animated show aimed at kids, this time focusing on teaching them how to care for children of different species, like Ewoks and Wookiees. Zen, Grogu, and Dust Bunnies, a traditional hand-drawn animated short by Studio Ghibli. In this one, baby Grogu interacts with the Susuwatari, the little soot sprites from director Hayao Miyazaki's movies. It's a neat milestone that marks the team-up of two absolute powerhouse brands. Tales, an anthology series focusing heavily on some of the franchise's most iconic characters. The 3 seasons are broken down by theme: Tales of the Jedi, Tales of the Empire, and Tales of the Underworld. Through these, we get to see things like Ahsoka's origin story. Ahsoka, starring Anakin's former Padawan, who had already made the jump from animation to live action in The Mandalorian. Following the fall of the Empire, she teams up with Sabine to stop Thrawn, who's harboring some pretty dark plans. The story acts as a direct continuation of Rebels, expanding the overall mythology while introducing a brand new threat: Young Jedi Adventures. Set during the High Republic era, it follows Force-sensitive children recruited by the Jedi. Under Yoda's guidance, they learn lessons about discipline and teamwork. The show is aimed specifically at preschoolers, proving that the Star Wars franchise really has no limits. The Acolyte. Taking place about 100 years before Episode 1, Osha, a former Padawan, investigates a series of crimes targeting Jedi Masters. The culprit turns out to be May, her twin sister, who has been consumed by the dark side. This series shows the Jedi Order at the height of its power, while also revealing their extreme choices and the rise of the Sith. Skeleton Crew. Set after Return of the Jedi, this one focuses on a group of kids who find a ship and get lost in the galaxy. To make it back to their home planet, they rely on the help of Jodna Nawud, a pirate trained in the Jedi arts. It's a coming-of-age adventure that shows this world and its mythology from a much more innocent, wonder-filled perspective. Maul Shadow Lord. An animated series that shows Darth Maul abandoned and betrayed by Darth Sidious. This drives him to plot his revenge against the Empire. The story explores the galaxy's criminal syndicates and gives a lot more depth to one of the franchise's most memorable villains, right before his ultimate end in Rebels. The Mandalorian and Grogu. After 3 hit seasons on Disney+, the galaxy's most beloved duo finally makes the jump to the big screen. The story picks up sometime after the Mandalorian Din Djarin formally adopted Grogu as his apprentice and heir. Now working as an official unit for the New Republic, the two set off on a mission to wipe out the remnants of Imperial warlords still lurking in the shadows. If you thought keeping up with the Star Wars saga was complicated after all this, you have no idea how crazy the production of B-Movie was. Luckily, we've got a video right here where we tell you the whole story.